Tov. Today's daf yomi is Gittin daf Lamed Gittin 30. Today's daf yomi. We're going to start on the top of Lamed Amid Aleph, on top of 30a, where since the Gemara discussed the case, a person who said it's as the get if I don't come in 12 months, if there was an ones that happened, meaning to say, so that's what the case of the Mishnah was. So there, the Gemara moves into a discussion of ones begitin. So the Gemara tells us, Ahuda Amar, and this is a case we remember from Ksuvos and Nidarim. It's really just thrown in here. It's not really given the full analysis because this isn't like the main source of this story. But there was a guy who said, he says, if I don't show up within the next 30 days, this is going to be your divorce. But also he came, but he was on the other side of the river. He missed, the river was stopping. He missed the boat. He missed the ferry. He's waving his hands and he's saying, I'm here. He's not there. He's on the other side of the river, but he's waving his hands saying, I'm here. So is that considered a reason to say that he showed up, or maybe he has an excuse? He has an excuse why he's not there. So maybe it's not going to be a valid get. So Amar Shmuel, Shmuel says, no, that's not called coming. He didn't show up. We don't accept that excuse. A man said, this is your get unless I can appease you within the next 30 days. If I don't appease you within the next 30 days, this will be the get. Also paisa. So he tried to appease her, but it didn't work. So he gave her, Rashi says, a lot of words, and he got all the friends to talk to her, but it didn't work. So also piece of oil paisa. So I'm Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, "Mi yaiva tarkava the dinar evoi paisa." So Rav Yosef says, no, he should have done more. Did he give her golden coins? Did he give her something more? He didn't really go do the most he could do, and so therefore Rav Yosef says that's not going to be considered like he was appeasing her, and so therefore it's a get. But there's a different version of this. Do you think he has to give her gold coins? No, he just has to say, I'm sorry, let's make it work. He tried, it didn't work. So the two versions of the Ikadamri of Rav Yosef, the one who says that he tried and it didn't work, then we call that an ones, meaning to say it's not our fault. Whereas the one, it's not his fault, and so therefore she's not divorced. And she would be divorced because he says, if I don't appease you within the next 30 days, you're divorced. And he tried, but we don't accept his excuse. And the approach that says he should have given her more, that means he didn't appease her, and so then she's automatically divorced. So the next Mishnah is really bring us into a little bit of a different topic, but this is what happens in Gittin sometimes. So Hamal v'mos es hakohen es alevi ves ha'ani. So a person who lends, the reason why we're moving to this topic is because since we're talking about chazaka and assumptions of whether or not he's still alive, we move into other topics, whether or not we could assume he's still alive. So Hamal v'mos, somebody lends money to a kohen, a levi, as a ha'ani, or a poor man, and the conditions of the loan is it's a good deal for the borrower, the kohen, the levi, or the poor man. He has to give a tithe to the kohen, it's called a truma, to the levi, it's called meiser, and then also to the poor man called meiser ani. From the levi's tithe, the levi has to separate trumas meiser, 10% of what the levi gets, he has to give to the kohen. So this person says, I'm lending you money to the kohen, the levi, or the poor man, but it's on the condition that when I come to separate the tithe that I owe to the kohen, the levi, or the ani, you're going to pay me back my loan from that money. So that's the deal, he says. So therefore, under those circumstances, he can separate the money with the assumption that they're still alive, and so he's giving them the tithe, and they're giving him back the money. They're not there, so therefore he has to work on the assumption that they're still alive, and that's a valid loan. Gemara says, HaKohen or Levi or Asher on. He doesn't have to be concerned that the Kohen died or the Levite died or the poor man got rich. Mesu, let's say those three people died. Let's say one of those three people died, the Kohen, the Levi, or the poor man, or the poor man got rich. Well, we'll see. The poor man is different, but let's say they died, the Kohen and the Levi. So he has to get permission from the heirs. And what does this mean? Rashi says that because this debt is not placed upon the heirs to pay it in that manner, he has to take permission from them if they want that he can receive this debt, that if they want to pay the debt of their father from this manner, meaning he can't just assume that they're willing to do that. So he has to take permission from the heirs. However, if he had loaned the Kohen and the Levi in front of the court, then he doesn't need to take the permission from the Bezdin. And Rashi explains, because the Bezdin has the authority to place this obligation that the father had accepted upon all Kohanim and Leviim. And the reason why they're doing this is a reform the Bezdin made, because otherwise people wouldn't give this sweet deal to the Kohen. I'm going to lend you the money on the condition that you'll pay me back from the Truma. Because if the Kohen dies and they're going to lose the money, nobody would lend it. So therefore, he lent it in front of the court to make sure that the court would transfer the debt of the Kohen to a different Kohen, and then he'd be able to collect it. So the Gemara says, well, how are you able to do this? How can you say we assume that the Kohen's still alive? I mean, the Kohen's not in your vicinity, but don't you have to transfer it to him first, and then he transfers it back to you? Even though you didn't actually give it to the Kohen, so you never acquired it. So how are you able to acquire it from him? So Amarav, so three answers of the Gemara. First answer is b'makirei kahuna, means to say this is the Kohen you always work with. This was the Kohen who used to come to your weddings, come to give you a share in your office. This is the Kohen who always showed up at the bar mitzvahs, and it's clear that this is your Kohen. So under those circumstances, every other Kohen knows he's giving to him. And so therefore, all the Kohanim, Rashi says, are going to give up. And so therefore, it's like it's already this Kohen's. That's the first answer. That's the answer of Rav. Shmuel says, Shmuel says you use a third party. That Kohen's not there, but another person comes and give it to the other person, and he can acquire it on behalf of the Kohen, and then he gives it back to you. And Ula says, Hamani Rabbi Yossi. Ula says this is the position of Rabbi Yossi, who say that the rabbis have the discretion to do this. Also, that in certain circumstances, the rabbis say, even though you didn't actually acquire it, we will view it as though you acquired it. We have rabbinic authority to do that, like in the case of a minor who acquired something, found an object, or a poor man sometimes who was shaking the fruit off the tree, then somebody else grabbed it. So the rabbis have the right to say that this person really acquired it, even though technically by biblical law he hasn't yet acquired it. Gemara says, "Kul Karabu Amri." The position of Rab is not accepted by Shmuel and Ula because b'makira lo katani. The Mishnah doesn't say anything about makirei kahuna. Because Shmuel Kamri also they don't accept the position of Shmuel, who had said they do it through a third party because b'mazaka lo katani. Because it doesn't say that in the Mishnah. And Ku'ula Nami Lo Amri, because why don't we say like Ku'ula Ki Chidai Lo Mukmina? We don't want to say that our position, like an individual, i.e. Rabbi Yossi, who says that the rabbis could do that because we don't want to establish our Mishnah, which is anonymous, like an individual. So now the Gemara goes into this concept more. Tana Rabbanan Amal B'Mois, it's a Kohen Levi V'Asani. So let's say a person lends money to the Kohen, the Levi, and the poor man. So therefore, what he has to do is lios ma'afra shalem michalkan, and the way he was doing it is he says, before I pay you back, I'm going to take a portion. Ma'afra shalem michalkan. He says, I'm going to take a portion of your tithe, and that's how you pay me back. Ma'afra shalem b'chaska shen kayaman. So you could assume that they're still alive when he separates the tithe. All this is from our Mishnah, but now the Brisa continues. But what price is he going to take for that wheat when he's saying, okay, you owe me $100, I'm going to take the truma of $100 by taking this wheat, but how much is he valuing the wheat? So it's like the cheaper price. Means if the price drops between the loan and the sale, he's going for the cheaper price of the wheat. And yet that's not going to be considered interest. It's not like he's giving him interest on the loan. We'll see why. So when it's not considered a loan, that the sabbatical year cancels it. And if he comes to reneg, who comes to reneg? The Gemara is going to discuss who comes to reneg. Eino chozer, he's not able to. Let's say the owners gave up hope on ever getting their crops. So it was a bad year. Then he can no longer separate the truma from it because you don't separate truma from property that was lost. So let's analyze this statement. Amar posik imayim kashar zol, that you give them the lower price when you separate the truma. So Mar says, isn't this obvious? Pshita. So Mar says, how come Ashkelon? No, it's teaching us afal pishal pasak, even though he didn't specify that I get the lower price. Kamisha pasak. I mean, it's as though he did specify. So therefore, that's the first concept. The second concept is ve'embo mishum ribas. It's not considered interest. Why not? My time. Kivin dechilei well, yavway ki islay nami embo mishum ribas. So the Gemara says, since kivin dechilei well, yavway, since if he would lose the principal, like if the crops would be ruined, and then the Kohen, then he wouldn't, the Kohen wouldn't have to pay him back. So now from the fact that he gets more, it's not going to be considered interest. I mean, there's an element of risk in the loan if the property is destroyed and the Kohen doesn't pay him back. So now that he gets a cheaper price, it's more like a partnership than a loan. And Rashi says, so in this case, we're going to say it's certainly not biblical ribis, and so therefore, even though generally speaking, we're going to require, we're not going to allow that. In this case, we're going to allow it because of the extenuating circumstances, and we want to encourage people to lend to the Kohanim. The ain't shvius mishamata, so, and the sabbatical year does not cancel it. Because what's the sabbatical year cancel? It cancels out the loans that you're pressing against them. Yigos, you're not allowed to press them. But since in this case, if the property would be destroyed, he wouldn't be able to make a claim against the Kohen, and also because it's already in his possession, it's not called pressing. So therefore, the loan is the sabbatical year doesn't cancel it. And if he wants to, hold on one second. So if he wants to recant Amar Papa, who do we say who's not able to recant? The Kohen. The person, once he makes his deal with the Kohen and the Kohen takes the money, then the Baal Bayis can't say give it back. But the Kohen who makes the claim against the Baal Bayis in Baal Achzor Choser. If the Kohen makes the claim against the Baal Bayis, if he wants to go back, then the Kohen, after he gets the money, he can renege on the deal and say, no, I don't want to do, I don't like this arrangement. I want to just give back the money. So therefore, what's the reason he's able to recant? The Tanam, because we learned in general, if you give a person money, then the person who gave the money can't recant, but the other person who didn't yet draw the fruit to him, you give him the money for the fruit, for the payros. The person who's getting the money, he hasn't actually entered into the deal until he draws the fruit. His acceptance of the money is not entering into the deal. He has to actually draw the fruit. So therefore, in this case, the Kohen could renege until such time as he picked up the fruit, or until the fruit was acquired. But until that time, the Kohen will be able to renege, but not the owner of the field. That if the owner gave up hope, then you can't separate the tithe in them, because we don't separate our tithe on something that was lost, and so therefore he gave up hope, and so he lost it. So the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't this obvious? The Gemara says, no. So when the crops dried out and he gave up hope, there was a stalk that was growing up. So you might have said, you might have said, well, the stalk is growing up, so it's really actually a milsa. That's something that exists. And so therefore he didn't really give up hope. Kamashwan, we don't say that. Tanya Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says, Hamal b'mos es hakohen v'es halevi bebezdin. So somebody who lends money to the Kohen and the Levi in the court. So we had said in our Mishnah that if you lend money to the Kohen and the Levi in the court, and then they die, you don't need to take permission from the heirs because it's already transferred to another Kohen. That was the principle that was established in our Mishnah. So we learn in the Brayso that Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says, Hamal b'mos es hakohen v'es halevi bebezdin u'meisu. That basically you could still continue to take the tithe by paying them back and saying they're pay back from the tithe by transferring it. The court must have transferred it to another member of that same tribe of a Kohen. That's the ani bebezdin. And also, let's say you lend it to a poor man in the court, umeis, and the poor man dies. We can assume that it was transferred to a different poor man. That's the assumption that the court has done. Now we assume that they transferred it not only to an Aniyeh Yisrael, but he says even if there were no poor Jews there, you could assume that they transferred to general poor people in the world. So look at Rashi. Rashi says, you can't say we can assume they transferred it to the heirs because maybe the heirs are wealthy. But they separate to other poor people. And so therefore we know that all the other poor people would want this. And so therefore, this is not going to be considered like you're stealing. So what's going to be the difference between Reb Achai, who says, and Reb Elazar ben Yaakov, who says that it's being transferred to other poor Jews? So what's the difference? The difference between them, top of 30b, is that if you transferred it to the poor people, when it refers to the poor people, the aniyei kutim. So let's say Rashi explains, let's say there are no poor Jews in the city, but there are kutim in the city. So therefore you can separate it, the tithe, and keep it for yourself because they are going to merit it. That's what Rav Achai is saying. That Rav Achai is of the position that the kutim are gerei emes, they really converted, and so therefore you can also continue to do it with the kutim. Whereas Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, the Tanakama, who actually not Tanakama, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov is citing the Brayso, or Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov in the Brayso, he says that the kutim were gerei arayis, and so therefore he says you're not supposed to separate them. You're only supposed to separate the tithe on behalf of poor Jews, and so therefore you would separate on poor Jews who are elsewhere. So it's saying that the assumption is that you have to give charity to the people who are with you, and you can't separate it in a different location. But according to Rav Achai, that the kutim were Jews, and so therefore you can also separate the money for them if you have kutim in your community. So let's say the poor man became wealthy, then you can no longer continue to separate him, separate the money for him. So let's say we're talking about a case that the poor man became wealthy, and so now he can no longer take for himself the tithe. Then the lender is no longer able to separate for him the loan because he can't. What's he going to do? This guy is wealthy; he's not entitled to it, and we don't say that he then transfers that loan to another poor person. And in fact, the poor man, since he had already gotten the loan, and he now doesn't have to. Now it was supposed to be paid back from Meiser Ani and the poor man's tithe, but there is no poor man's tithe here, so he just gets to keep the money. He comes out ahead. So the Gemara says, Rabbanan ma'ishnam amisa da'avitakanta. Rabbanan say, why in the case of death did they help him out? Why in the case of death do we help out the person who lent money to the poor person? We just transfer it to a different poor. And why in the case of wealth do we not do this takana? And we say that he just loses his money. So the Gemara says, Misa shlicha ashir so shlicha. Death is common, but getting wealthy is not common. And so therefore, they didn't make a takana with the assumption that what happens if he gets wealthy. And Amar Papa, you don't have to be concerned that he's going to get wealthy. And Amar Papa, Hainu Damri Inchi, is why people say, Chavrayach Meis, Osher is Asher, Los Asher. If a person tells you that your friend died, Asher, you believe him. But if he tells you it's Asher, he tells you that your friend got wealthy, go to Asher. Don't believe him. So that's a very powerful idea that everybody thinks that they're going to get wealthy, but few people realize that we're going to die. But really, the reality is the opposite. And that the death is much more common than getting wealthy. So then the Gemara says, that if the person who borrowed the money died, you need to get permission from the heirs. Tanya, Rabbi Omer, Yarshin Shayarshin. So you have to get permission from the heirs to transfer the debt to the heirs. So the Gemara says, Rebbe says that this refers to the heirs that inherited. So the Gemara asks, I don't understand. Are there heirs that don't inherit? No, so Rabbi Yochanan is telling us first the heirs that inherit real estate, but not heirs that inherit money. Meaning, say, when do the heirs have responsibility to pay the debt? Only when it's real estate. But when it's money, they don't have responsibility to pay back the debt of their father. Actually, the Shulchan Aruch today rules that nowadays, it says that actually they do have to. Bismanenu, nowadays the Gaonim instituted that he could collect it even from the movable property. But in the time of Talmud, it wasn't the case. Rabbi Yonasan said, let's say the person left a very small amount of land to his descendants, to his heirs, then that's all he can inherit. And hiniach malay kardom, if he left a larger amount, he could collect a large amount, meaning he can only collect from the real estate. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, afilu hiniach malay mechat, even if you left a small amount the size of a needle, gova malay kardom, he could collect a full amount the size of an axe. Like the case of Abaye ruled in a case where a person, where the heirs owed money and they only left a small amount, percentage was a real estate, that the lender could take the real estate, and then when the heirs bought it back, he'd go seize it again. So that was the case of Abaye, and Rabbi Yochanan says that could be the same case here that Rabbi Yonasan is referring to. Tana Rabbanan, Yisrael Sha'amar Levi. Let's say there was a regular Jew who said to the Levi, Meiser Yesh L'cha biyadi, I have a tithe that belongs to you, my possession. So Ein Choshen L'Trumas Meiser. We don't have to be concerned that Meiser has within it Trumas Meiser. So the Meiser is the tithe to the Levi, but that could be eaten after it's given to the Levi. It could be eaten by anyone. Whereas the Trumas Meiser is the 10% of the tithe that was given to the Levi, and that has to be eaten by a Kohen. That's called Kohen. So while if the Meiser contains Trumas Meiser, then we don't have to be worried about. Then we can't eat it. But in this case, the Yisrael said to the Levi, I have your Meiser in my possession. We don't have to be concerned that there's Trumas Meiser in it. We'll see why in the Gemara. But Kor Meiser Yesh L'cha biyadi. But if he says that there's a specific amount of Meiser that I have, then we do have to be concerned with Trumas Meiser. So the Gemara says, what's this statement of this price? What's this price telling us? So Amar Abaye is telling us that this is the concept. Abaye says, Yisrael Sha'amar Levi, Meiser Yesh L'cha biyadi. So the concept here is, if there's a regular Jew who says to the Levi that I have your Meiser in my possession, ve'helach damav, and he says, and then he gives him the money, the Yisrael gives the Levite the money for that Meiser. We don't have to be concerned that the Levi went on his own and took Trumas Meiser from that, meaning to say he had his own property, which he said designated that some of the Meiser that this Yisrael was selling to him, he designated that some of that Meiser was a Trumas Meiser, in which case, since we don't know which is that Trumas Meiser, none of it could be eaten. None of the Meiser could be eaten. We don't have to be concerned about that. But if it was Kor Meiser Yesh L'cha biyadi, but if it was a specific amount, Then we do have to be concerned because since he knows the exact amount that was there, and maybe the Levi designated some of it as Chumas Meiser because he knows exactly how to do 10% of it. Gemara says, what are you talking about? You think we're talking, the price is referring to a case of wicked people, that the Levite would take money for the Meiser, and then after he took the money, he designated, or even before he took the money, he designated a portion of the Chumas Meiser, and yet he took money for it. This is not logical, or we don't want to say we're referring to Chumas Meiser, to wicked people. This is how Rashi explains it. Ein choshesh. We don't have to be concerned. Yisrael says Shema la'achar shemachro Levi, and maybe after he sold it to the Levi. Also, Levi said Chumas Meiser or Meiser achar shahayol beiser. That maybe the Levi took other Chumas, took from this Meiser, Chumas Meiser, on other Meiser he had in his house. To keep him to Yada Kamayesh Biyada. He doesn't know how much in his possession. He went to made a Chumas Meiser. But if he said Kor Meiser, but if he says a specific amount and he gave them the money, then the Jew can't eat it. The Yisrael can't eat it. And even if he separated Chumas Meiser from it. Why? Because we have to be concerned, maybe after the Levite took the money, also Kul and Chumas Meiser, he made the whole thing Chumas Meiser on 9 kurin that he has in his house. So because why? Rashi says the kivan to a mashach yachol lachzor Levi, because since the Levi, has go back to Amud Aleph, since the Levi didn't actually pull the produce into his possession, he could recant on the deal and make it Chumas Meiser. And even though it was in the possession of the Jew, the money we said on Amud Aleph is not a way to acquire it. It's not a valid way of acquiring it. So it's possible that the Levi recanted. So the Gemara says, but that's a Rishai, that's a wicked person if he's acting like this. I mean, say he's doing something that's wrong. So do you think that's what we're referring to? That he's going to take the money and then he'll go back on his deal, even though technically speaking he's not violating the law, it's still going to be deeply problematic. So the Gemara says, "Elamar Masharshia Berei de Rav Idi Halchakamar Yisrael Sha'amar Ben Levi." So we're talking about a case where the Yisrael says to the son of a Levi, "Ma'aser la'avicha biyadi." He says, I gave your father Ma'aser and I have it in my possession. Hail damav, and take the money. We don't have to be concerned that the father had already used that money for Chumas Meiser. But if you say Kor Meiser, if it's a specific amount, then maybe the father did use that specific amount as Chumas Meiser, and then you wouldn't be able to eat it. The Gemara says, hold on one second. So the Gemara says, well, that's not possible, because do you think we would have to be suspicious that this chaver, this person who's careful about tithes, will take it from tithes that are not directly next to each other? You're only supposed to take tithes from when you're in the vicinity of the produce you're tithing. And so in this case, if he's nowhere near it, we don't assume that he would do that. So this is how we learn this statement from the Brisa. Or say Yisrael says to the Levite, this is what my father said, that my father told me that he either has some of your meiser or some of your father's meiser, then it's just the opposite. And then we do have to be concerned that there's chumas meiser in it. Kivan the low kids will have a mitaking like Balabai. Since he doesn't know the exact amount, then he would not have been able to take out the chumas meiser. But kor meiser chabiyadi, kor meiser avi chabiyadi. But if it's a specific amount, then in choshen with chumas meiser shabo. Then we don't have to be concerned about chumas meiser. Even the kids. So because since the father told them the exact amount of meiser, tikuni takanti balabais, we could assume his father also took the chumas meiser from it. So the Gemara says, wait, do you think his father is the balabais would have permission to take a chumas meiser without the Levite knowing about it? Yes, the Gemara would have said he would have had permission. Abba Elazar ben Gamla, because this is the position of Abba Elazar ben Gamla. The Tanya Abba Elazar ben Gamla says It says in the pasuk, "V'nechshav lachem l'trumaschem." It says in the pasuk of Bamidbar, "V'nechshav lachem l'trumaschem kedagam min hagoren v'cham loya min ha." Yeah, Kev. It's next week's parsha. So we're talking about there. B'shtei trumas hakasim and davar. Why does it say b'trumas? It's referring to two trumas. Achas trumas gedola, achas trumas meiser. One is truma gedola, one is trumas meiser. Kashem she truma gedola. Trumas gedola is directly given to the Kohen. Trumas meiser first goes through the Levi, but just like trumas gedola, nitelas omeid ubemachshava can be given with guesstimation and with thought. Thought is a whole discussion of itself. Do you have to physically pick it up, or just think it, or maybe you have to say it? But so too, chumas meiser, and he tells us, so too, that's how chumas meiser could be given. Just like the balabayas could take away the truma gedola and give it to the Kohen. So the balabayas would also have the permission to do this chumas meiser, even without the knowledge of the Levi. So that's what the Gemara says, and that's the position of Abba Lazar ben Gamma. Okay, Yashkoyach, if anybody has any questions on this beautiful daf, happy to address.